Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Foot bore, and maybe at like the 300, 250 is kind of falling in from there.
That was not my understanding.
Interesting.
We're live.
Okay.
We're live. All right, let's go ahead and call the March 10th, 2025 Resource Conservation Commission meeting to order at 6:31. Kim, do you mind being timekeeper?
I would love to.
Okay, great, thank you. I assume there's no one here from the public. Look like it. Okay, item 2 on the agenda is approval of the draft minutes from the February 10 RCC meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I second.
Okay, so discussion? I didn't have any. If there's no discussion, all in favor of approving the draft minutes from February 10th, 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, meeting minutes approved. Next on the agenda, item 4, new business. Presentation on edge sensors for cost-effective recycling and waste management. Jim, do you want to introduce the speaker?
Yes, I'm happy to. Dr. Orrin Iden is online from St. Louis University. Dr. Iden and I have multiple federal level grants together in the waste management area and recycling, including a sensor-based approach on tracking recycling through the St. Louis metro area. Dr. Iden has a idea for a new grant and is looking for new municipal partners on where we might take this. So with that introduction, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Iden.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Tinjam. Hello. Thank you for having me on this call. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I have a couple of slides to show to introduce the project, if that's okay. As Jim introduced, this is about our NSF projects we call Internet of Waste, where we design sensors for effective waste management and also education and outreach. So in a nutshell, the goals of this project is reducing recycling cross-contamination and creating a continuous monitoring of the waste stream to optimize and also to assess the impact of different education campaigns, outreach campaigns, and materials that are out there for residents to use to know what to recycle and what not to recycle, with the main means of achieving these goals being transforming waste bins into a smart city infrastructure through Internet of Things of IoT. So with these in mind, we aim to, in terms of waste management, we aim to reduce cross-contamination of recyclables during collection, informing overfull bins, creating data-driven insights, basically being able to predict over time at which parts of the city we expect there to be high recycling contamination, overfull bins, illegal dumping, to really create a early warning system for managing solid waste, refuse, and also recyclable waste. And of course, with these insights, when we see spatial patterns at the community level, for example, if there are what we call a lot of wish cycling happening, a lot of things that residents might think is recyclable, but actually it's not. If we start seeing these patterns, we also do data-driven outreach to really give the citizens what they need in terms of what they need to know on how to recycle. So the overview of the system in the overview of solid waste management is basically we are transforming recycling bins, municipal bins, and waste bins into edge devices, so that if a specific collection route, and I here mark them in this cartoon example with different lines, before it goes to a transfer station, where it's going to be mixed up with all the other waste, or before it goes into the MRF, basically creating this early warning system to where only the cleanest recyclables go through this recycling system, with the overall goal of really increasing the recyclable percentage, the recycling efficiency in this entire system. So really we are moving the needle all the way to the edge into the recycling bins to create this early warning system with this project. And the way this looks like is we built these low-cost sensors, which you can see on the left. It's that blue box. It's about 4 inches, as you see from the scale. We have a camera. We have a microwave motion sensor, so we know when people are using the bins to have an idea of utilization. This is all self-powered using solar batteries, solar panels and a battery. And we also have ultrasonic sensors to determine how full the bin is. And we have our own internet infrastructure to where we can collect this data efficiently from these. And here you can see me and my postdoc in one of our municipal bins here installing one of these sensors. You can see the sensor I'm holding in my hand, so they're quite small. And once we install this, these are all self-sufficient, and the type of data we get is a continuous image feed in addition to how full the bin is. So here are some differences that we have already seen. One on the left is the North St. Louis City, where we know there is higher contamination rates. As you see, there are a lot of organic waste, food waste, and unrecyclable items, even construction waste. And on the right is the South City, which is known to be a very clean recycling stream. And we see that a lot of materials are already clean and ready to be recycled. But we go one step forward. We have an AI model that can automatically detect what is being thrown in. So here you can see what our AI model detects from these image feeds. We can detect, and let me give you a detailed example of this. For example, in this frame, we can detect the form. For example, are there bottles, boxes, etc.? Material, is this paper, plastic, or metal? And subtype of that material, is this PET1 plastic? Is this OCC cardboard, etc.? So we create these very detailed information from the sensor network that we create. In addition, we have some nuisance unrecyclable wastes that can hamper operations, such as plastic bags, lithium-ion batteries, as we know, can create fires and MRFs, and also organic waste that can contaminate the entire recycling load that we detect specifically in addition to these recyclable items. In addition, our AI model also detects how full the bin is from this data. So the summary of this waste sensor network is these are very cheap for us to manufacture, since we do everything all the way down to the chips in our lab. We manufacture these units for about $20 per unit. We installed over 100 bins in St. Louis already. We are ramping up to 200 bins a month in St. Louis. And we will be excited about the prospect of being able to install these in your city as well to create the system. We know that they withstand extreme weather. This often becomes a question with these bins. They have lived through the winter storm Blair in St. Louis, and also the heat wave we had back in 25th of August. The temperature's up to almost 120 degrees. And in addition to that, we create our AI model, which is quite efficient in terms of extracting information. And I want to take a couple of more minutes just to talk about what do these insights mean for waste management and what that means for a city. Here are the bins here up north is the collection route in the North City with high contamination rates. The one below is the South City route. So we are working with the city of St. Louis, and we grabbed these collection routes. And I've also shown you where the bins are, the recycling bins along that route. We installed our sensors in here, and mostly prioritizing collection routes with different 311 call volumes. So from the sensor network, this is the kind of insight that we can get. So here, the light blue shows what is recyclable, and everything else is non-recyclable, things that contaminate the load. So before even we send a truck out there to collect this waste, we actually know what's in these bins, what the contamination is going to be like, so that we can optimize operations before a truck goes out there. One thing that we've seen, which was a confirmatory result here, is up north, we have a lot of non-recyclable mixed waste that contaminates this recycling load, which in this case might be better if it's routed to the landfill without making it go through the entire recycling sorting stream just for it to end up there anyway. And this is basically an aggregate result. On the left is the North City. As you see, the big disparity in the non-recyclable or the recyclable percentages. North City has a lot higher recyclable waste in their stream compared to the North City. And another thing that we're working on is taking this data to optimize waste collection routes. So here's an example. The yellower colors indicate cleaner bins or cleaner routes in that segment of the alley, whereas the red ones indicate high cross-contamination. So we create AI models that can use this model to inform collection drivers on which bins to visit to minimize cross-contamination and to maximize the recyclability of this waste. And here are basically some examples where if we, and if you look at the one on the right, if we only collect, our AI model can learn a route that is fuel efficient, that is as short as possible, that minimizes cross-contamination, which involves only picking up a certain number of the bins just to optimize the recycling cross-contamination rate. That being said, these are all optional and some examples of some of the insights that we generate with this project. It will depend on the city's needs. We also do targeted community outreach. This is me and my lab. When we see these patterns of high non-recyclable items, we actually go there with our community partners to do basically what is recyclable, what is not, and we organize these hard-to-recycle festivals. Again, thank you so much for giving me time in your meeting. It was great to be able to talk about this project. So this is an ongoing NSF project, and upon also talking with Dr. Tinjum, we are very interested in partnering or the possibility of partnering with your city. Everything we do is NSF funded, so we do not request any funds other than really a partnership. And I think a project in Fitchburg can be quite special in that it's a much smaller town compared to what we work on, so that we can see direct effects of outreach and targeted messaging towards recycling on changes to the cross-contamination rates. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. So in St. Louis, say you've got a bin that based on your sensors that has quite a bit of contamination in it. The drivers then just don't pick that up, or they just put it in with their trash truck. Is that basically what they've been doing then?
So that is not citywide. The pilot we have with the city basically is right now studying the effect of that. And that pilot, what we are basically doing is we are taking it off the recyclable collection route. So those highly contaminated bins are visited with a refuse truck instead.
Okay, gotcha.
So is there a certain percentage that you go by in terms of the amount of contaminated waste that's in a bin?
That's a great question. We are not really looking at absolutes. It really depends on where that bin is. For example, if that bin is at the very end of a collection route, it might be lower risk in that what we basically found out is if that high contamination rate is in the truck longer, it has a higher probability of contaminating more waste. Another factor that we take into account is how central is that bin? For example, if that bin is already on the way to a recyclable truck, we do accept a higher rate of contamination if tipping that bin allows us to get near many other cleaner bins when we collect. So we are basically looking at multiple things to optimize rather than only cross-contamination. We are also looking at fuel efficiency, the simplicity of the routes, and making sure that the routes are not too different than the routes that the city has negotiated with their drivers.
Thank you. Does the city of St. Louis, does their public works department do the collection then, or do they contract that out?
No, in city of St. Louis, the city street department is fully responsible for collecting the waste. Their job is to take it from the bins to the waste station, the transfer station, and after the transfer station, it's Republic and Waste Connections that handle refuse or recyclables.
Is it then the streets department that's also doing kind of the monitoring, tracking of all the sensor data and GIS work? Is that your team at SLU, or?
That is my team at SLU, but the data products that we create, we are integrating it into their GIS database because their plans are based off of their own GIS system, but the mapping and these optimization for routes is something that we do in my lab.
Yeah, because that's one that I'm curious if there was a partnership between St. Louis and Fitchburg here, kind of how that would be managed on our side.
Yeah, that's a great question. I did have conversations with Republic, at least in St. Louis. They don't get to decide because whatever the city gives them, they need to haul. In St. Louis County, Republic collects them, and their point was this project will be a great discussion point for them in 3 years once their contract is over and they need to sign a new one. But in the current contract, they don't really have the luxury of not tipping recycling bins, disregarding how contaminated they are.
I had a question about, so if you are finding that it's kind of repeat offenders with the, the ongoing mixed waste, do you guys do any outreach to them, like mailers or anything to let them know that, hey, we skipped you because you have too much, contamination in your bins, or how are you letting them know?
That's a great question. We are letting them know by two ways. The first one is we hold with one of the nonprofit partners here called a Hard to Recycle Festival. We basically attract the neighbors by providing a free service, which is accepting hard to recycle items like electronics, TVs, like things that they have to pay to recycle. They bring that to the event at no cost. We have a drive-through style event to where they will basically have to, they're a captive audience in that they are, we are basically just providing them broad information and letting them know about some of the statistics of their neighborhood when it comes to contamination. So that's one way. We also do targeted household level outreach. We do that with door hangers and flyers. We basically, without really putting any blame, we basically say that in this area, we noticed that some of these items, especially plastic bags, are finding themselves into the recycling bins. Here are some useful tips to avoid that. And that happens with one of our other partners, Paul Harrison, which is a PR firm in St. Louis, and they're very creative with their flyers to get that information across at the household level.
So it sounds like there's been success with the sensors being able to identify these very specific objects and kind of using that information then to incorporate into education and outreach. If you've kind of identified a few, specific items that keep showing up in recycling bins, is that fair to say it's been successful at that?
I would say we had some minor successes. I wish I can make a definitive statement. We started the project a year ago. This is the end of our planning period, and we are applying for a larger grant this year. I guess my answer is we have some small wins under our belt. We have seen some behavior change for about a month, and that is at this point the best we can expect. And we are hoping that by scaling this system out and being able to do longer term outreach, and as a part of this ongoing project, we are also envisioning an app to where if, for example, somebody has a roll cart, we have a mixed system here at St. Louis, it's roll carts and alley bins, but roll cart, which belongs to a certain household, basically having an app that goes with the sensor that your recycling bin gives you feedback saying that I noticed that you have been putting XYZ in me this week a lot. Please note that these are not really recyclable. So basically having that conversation started with residents and their recycling bins.
I was going to ask you, when you say bin, what do you mean? Because I'm thinking of the bin that, is at our standard single-family house, which is like a 65-gallon bin. And putting a $20 sensor on, 7,000 homes, I'm not sure how, what's the end state that you envision for a plan like this?
That's a good question. So basically we want to at this stage in our grant, we want to show that if the scale is increased to what I would call a small scale, which is the city of St. Louis, they operate, I'm not sure of the exact number, but definitely north of 10,000 bins, just to show that the recycling stream can be optimized. Right now, we have almost 200 bins that are active collecting data, and that only covers about 2.5 collection rounds in the city. And when I say bins, I mean we have two types of bins that we operate here. One we call alley bins. These are the large recycling bins that are in the alleys used by multiple families, and also roll carts that are more personalized to especially single-family homes. So basically the sensors are slightly different in their form, but the data we collect is the same.
How is the recycling collected on at multifamily units? Is it a large bin?
It's typically the alley carts here. Yeah, typically a roll-off dumpster.
Okay, so
I'll show
those.
It looks like this.
So is this something where you're also, I assume with your data analytics, you're tracking maybe contamination of the larger bins like this in a multifamily versus the single-family roll carts?
Yes.
So that could be something where after a couple of pilots, you might say, 80% of our contamination issues are in this type of cart, so we can target that more effectively. And
that is actually right on point. City of St. Louis is most interested in this. They definitely are interested in optimizing their operations, but half of that is not really in their control. One question they want to answer is they're trying to get rid of alley bins. And every time they say, we think they contribute to our recycling problems, they have no data to back it up. Through this project, they want to make a data-driven statement that exactly like what you said, that alley bins are showing high cross-contamination. Citywide, we should encourage roll carts as much as possible, especially in single-family housing neighborhoods.
I would suspect that would happen more, but also, if we get complaints from residents about recycling issues, it's multifamily because you've got 20 families sharing one bin. So if 2 families care, they're going to notice and complain. If I'm a single family home not doing it right, I'm not going to complain about myself.
Yep.
And so certainly the anecdotal data that we receive would implicate multifamily, but that's just because of the nature of how those are structured.
Yeah. I mean, how would you envision a pilot study working in Fitchburg since our waste is picked up by a private contractor? So you would have to work with the pelletary or whoever it is.
I envision this being, there definitely can be uncertainties with the waste contractors, and I had a similar conversation with Republic that they are bound by the contract that they have. What I envision here is, as opposed to route optimization, basically collecting data, giving that data, a higher level data to residents to be able to do data-driven outreach, to observe the effect of education and outreach and information on recycling, reuse and reduce campaigns, to basically assess its impact on the contamination rates in the recycling stream. So in that regard, I envision this, given that you have a contractor, I envision this to be more of a, here is sensor data, here are the patterns, here are some educational interventions, that takes different forms. What is its impact on a community like Fitchburg?
Being an environmentally conscious community like Madison and Fitchburg, what challenges would you see? I mean, a lot of us are very dutiful in how we recycle and do things like that. So would this be something that, I don't know, would be any challenge, or
mean, like most people here recycle and do it properly.
One of the challenges we observe, and that's basically like our South City, they're very much engaged. Every time we are out there inside their bins installing sensors, they ask us a lot of questions, they ask us how it's going. The issue that a lot of communities such as that has is what we call wish cycling, that they recycle too much. They put things that are not really recyclable, that they think or believe are recyclable, and spend time preparing them. For example, we have a lot of folks who fold their plastic bags before they put it in the recycling bin, thinking that it actually makes a difference, but it doesn't. So I think it can make a difference there. And if I'm not mistaken, you asked what challenges I envision. One challenge that I believe every community has is actually right there on the slide is the camera. They also want to make sure that this is not, transferring some private information. And we also overcome that challenge with our AI model because we do not transmit images outside of bins. At the end, what our sensors transmit to a central station are not images like that, but basically the composition of what is inside a bin. So all the images stay where they are in the bin, and we only get what our model predicts to basically be respectful of this privacy concerns that the citizens have. Because what we've observed, especially in the South City where the recycling stream is so clean, there is some sensitive information such as pill bottles that have a lot of personal information on them. And we basically address that with our edge computing system to make sure that that data never leaves the sensors and are not stored in any way.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. How do you get people to opt into this? I mean, is it basically you're showing up at their house and putting the sensor on their bin, or is it more of bringing people together, explaining what you're doing, and then having people volunteer to take part in the pilot?
For roll cards, right now we are on a volunteering system. We send a flyer out, and if they opt in, they basically just shoot an email to a central email address, and then we just install one of our sensors the next time their bin is tipped. In terms of the alley bins, they are fully owned by the city. Well, the roll cards are owned by the city as well, but we reach out to the residents. With alley bins, there really is no contact. It's in an alley owned by the city, and we have a working agreement with the city to where we have access to install inside them. So those bins we don't have. We basically cover all of them, or envision to cover all of them. With roll cards, right now we're in a subscription system. So that's basically our current operating principle.
Do you have any rough idea of approximately how many sensors you would ideally be looking to install in Fitchburg if there was a pilot here?
We will probably start with one of our pilots, 100 and 100. So getting 100 bins done, that basically takes us about a weekend to do. And depending on how many bins there are in Fitchburg, and that is something that definitely will be a factor. Basically, through this grant, we hope to cover any family that opts in. We want to be able to serve them.
Okay.
But that also depends on how many bins there are in Fitchburg.
Yeah, there's about 6,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Are we anywhere close to going to phase 2, Dr. Iden, where we would tag certain recyclables and non-recyclables and see if we could scan them at the landfill or MRFs and see their destination on certain deliberately tagged items?
Yes, so that's a great reminder, Dr. Tingham. So a part of one of the pilots we haven't run yet in St. Louis because we are still working with landfills for permission. But that's one of the special things I think where you are, Dr. Tingham has very good working relationships with landfills over there. One of our pilots is we also manufacture little RFID labels. They look like little stickers. We mail those out to people, and we basically encode their address on that RFID or their latitude and longitude on that RFID. The whole idea is they basically stick it onto one of their cardboard boxes, plastic bottles, whatever they want to track. And I think you might have seen in the news people do these things with AirPods. They put them in, or these AirTags, to see where they go, which is quite dangerous because they have lithium batteries in them. But we basically do that, send that sticker out in about a week, 10 days, fly with a RFID reader on one of our heavy lift drones over a landfill to see which addresses recyclable waste ended up in that landfill, to basically create a transparent system of where people's recyclables go.
So, I mean, that's our vision. There's a lot of work to get there, but these are the steps that it takes to get there. And data is data. It's like, we may not act on it right away, but we have data that we can then discuss, okay, what do we need to do to help reduce X or increase Y? And it's a data-driven type of project.
Yeah, and so I can see a lot of benefits here, and one of them, I don't know if you've thought about or not, but I mean, if you do this pilot in various cities and you see consistently the same problem, regardless of, you know, geography and city and demographic, can we use that as leverage on the manufacturers of this packaging and say, hey, don't do that?
Absolutely. Part of our goal with this larger grant is to study what we can capture, exactly what you described, to enforce extended manufacturer reliability. So far, we have seen that can be a double-edged sword, but we definitely want to go there. The only reason is, for example, if we are, and we can easily read what's on the labels. For example, if it's Coca-Cola, we will know that. We just want to make sure that that data is not used the other way around for Coca-Cola to see where their products are not being sold and then start targeting those communities with ads to make sure that their products do end up in their bins. So it's really a balancing act there. But that definitely is one of our plans, to find a good way to do that. And it's great to hear that there are thoughts about that over there too. And I think we can definitely think about ways to what type of data we can collect to basically enforce that.
I just had a quick question about adjusting to different recycling programs in different communities. I'm assuming that can be done. Correct, and then I have some follow-up questions.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
So the question is, can you adjust to differing recycling programs? Because like a lot of communities, you know, even in our area, have different things that are recyclable. So just wondering how you can adjust, you know, per communities' recycling requirements.
Yes, we absolutely can. Right now, the labels that we create, like you see on the slide, are quite general and they're pretty much universal. But if there are certain ones that are not accepted, we can always label those categories as unrecyclable and adjust our model that way. And for example, if there are certain things that are not really ending up, for example, here we see a lot of styrofoam cups, which may not be the case over there, which might skew the data. A part of my lab creates, basically labels this data as we go along, because the AI model takes a lot of these human labels to learn. We can definitely increase our labels using the data that is coming from Fitchburg to fine-tune that to the waste stream over there. And that wouldn't be a heavy lift on our part.
Okay, sounds good. And then the grant, you know, I assume that's paying for a lot of what you're trying to do here. Is there any financial commitment that would be needed from the city of Fitchburg
No.
as part of this grant?
No.
We just need people that are interested in doing it.
Right. So we are not, with this grant, the idea is to fund all of the hardware, the IoT system, basically all the hardware and software we would consume will be paid for by the grant, including our times to come over there, travel there, and install these. So we wouldn't be seeking any compensation from the city. Well, the only compensation we'll be seeking is this, your time to discuss our projects, to fine-tune it.
And what would be the timeline to get started?
If awarded, we'll get started in the October, basically late 2025. And in terms of this grant, it'll be a 4-year grant. Our current plan is to ramp up production, basically get our first 1,000 sensors out the door by December of this year. When I say 1,000, basically 1,000 additional sensors, which probably will get us to around 1,500 by the time of at the end of the year. Depending on how many bins we agree on doing in Fitchburg, so by early next year, we'll probably be at a rate of 200 to 300 sensors, 500 to 600 sensors per month. And over the course of basically our project, we will set some timelines and milestones. It really depends on how many bins that we agree to do, how many people opt into this program in Fitchburg, because our basically main timeline determinant is how many sensors do we need to manufacture, because our IoT system scales up so easily. So depending on how many households we need to cover, I would basically plan for 1 month for every 5 to 600 households in Fitchburg.
A comment and a question. Just knowing this community, if we put an ad or an article in the Fitchburg Star, I'm gonna guess we would get hundreds of people that would be interested. And then second, Dr. Iden, the risk, US EPA to do continuation funding, lose funding given the federal climate. What is your opinion on the risk of grant continuation and certainty of funding?
It's definitely hard to predict what we're going to be faced with in terms of policy next year. All I can talk about is the evidence I have to apply for. So this is our planning grant that was funded by NSF. And just last month, we submitted a preliminary proposal to apply for this large proposal, which was seen by the new crew at NSF, at least the ones that stayed with the current executive orders in place. And we got news last week that we were strongly encouraged to apply. So even within the current climate, from our preliminary application from last month, there is interest. And when I think about this problem, I think what we see as environmentally conscious residents is environmental risk, but we also communicate this as economic opportunity in that right now, when we compare ounce to ounce, 1 ounce of plastic, recycled plastic, is about 12.5 times more expensive than its virgin counterparts produced by petroleum. Now, we won't be able to make it cheaper, but if we make the recyclable stream more effective, that price will go down so that we can basically unlock about $1 trillion worth of recyclables that end up in landfills with a more efficient system. So there's definitely that side of the story as well, which is of system optimization and being able to use raw materials and resources effectively.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Iden? If not, I really appreciate your time. I guess what would be the next follow-up, Jim?
Dr. Iden, what would we need from the city? A letter of commitment? Should this go through? What are we asking today?
If there's interest, if the city is interested in running a pilot with these sensors, what we would need would be a letter of support for which NSF has a template, which is just putting that template on a letterhead and a signature by our application deadline, which is April 4th. We will need that 1 week in advance, so basically the last week of March. But before we get there, if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Dr. Tinjim, who is a co-PI on this project, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have. What I would also very much appreciate is, after seeing everything you saw today, if you believe that if we collected this data set from the sensors, maybe we need this in Fitchburg, I would love to hear that so that we can incorporate it. There won't be any, I would say, hard commitment. The only thing will be that letter of support, which basically states that we are supportive of this proposal going forward. But that's the only thing that we would ask.
So you would have to get some from Pelletier, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the city owns the carts, but yes. I'd have to look back. I don't know if this is something that council would need to, authorize support of this. If that is the case, that could be a little hang up. I know they're not having a council meeting.
We meet tomorrow, and then this second meeting of March is spring break, and enough people have said they're out of town that we've canceled that meeting, so we won't meet again until April 8th.
Possibly it's something that could just come from the city administrator or mayor, but I'll have to look into that. If it does have to go through a resolution through council, I mean, man, that's a full 4 days after the time you need it. That would be really disappointing because this sounds like a great opportunity.
I can forward the letter of support template. It's pretty non-committal. It says, if this grant is awarded, the city of Fitchburg will support your effort. It doesn't say we'll put it into 500 bins or X, Y. It's pretty generic, and I can share that generic letter of support.
That'd be great.
So do we own the larger bins as well at multifamily units?
We do not, so I don't think we'd be able to necessarily get sensors in at multifamily units unless the property management company, was
Unless there was a
volunteering.
partnership that they wanted to be part of.
We could work into that.
But we could try for sure.
Yeah. First phase could be just the residential cars. But do you think there's something that we would have to do with Pelletary?
I'll have to talk with them at least.
All right.
Do we have any problems with cross-contamination at the recycling center, at all the...
Fish Hatch?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would it be worth putting devices in those dumpsters?
You definitely could. I mean, there's not a huge problem with the cardboard. The bigger issues are with the polystyrene dumpster and then the metal dumpster. But certainly where a location that does have pretty frequent contamination is some of the roll-off dumpsters at like McKee Farms Park.
Oh, yeah.
That's a kind of a hot spot, and that's a roll-off dumpster that we could probably get a sensor on.
I think the positives with doing this in a community the size of Fitchburg is first the environmental commitment. I think we have a pretty strong city. Second is we have those connections close by with the MRF recycling facility, the landfill for this phase 2. We have it all right here, and we don't have the funding yet. It's very positive, but I think Fitchburg could, I don't want to say lead the nation, but we would be a leading community in this Internet of Waste concept. I think it would be, well, I'm a co-PI, so I'm biased. It could be very amazing, if that's the right word.
I have one more thought on, if we did need a council resolution, the committee of the whole meeting is moved up a week. It's on the 19th. It normally would have been on the 26th, the week of spring break. So if we're meeting for the committee of the whole on that Wednesday, possibly we could have a special session for this one item.
Yeah, I'll talk with our administrator, Chad, and see how he wants to handle that. But man, that would be, I think, a missed opportunity to not take advantage. This sounds like a really awesome program for the city of Fitchburg.
Yeah.
So our action items are you have your follow-ups with the city administrator.
Talk to
And then Jim's gonna send you the.
Or if you could send me the letter of support, and I'll get it forwarded on to the committee here.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Aiden. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay. Next on the agenda, item 5B, Resolution R-46-25, approval of the City of Fitchburg Sustainability Plan. Is there a motion to approve that plan?
I move approval.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, second. Open for discussion. Phil, do you want to?
Yeah, I give a quick overview. We have Ted Redmond back with us again from Pale Blue Dot, who helped really lead this effort. Thanks for calling in, Ted. There isn't, I think everybody's pretty well up to speed on what the effort has been so far. Obviously, we've been about somewhere between 18 and 24 months now since we kind of kicked off this process.
for getting a sustainability plan put together. So we had the draft plan presented to RCC last fall. That's when we presented to Committee of the Whole as well. We spent the next couple of months, Ted and I, working on kind of identifying what edits, revisions, requests, questions, all that needed to be addressed, needed to be reflected in changes, or at least, if things weren't going to be changed, at least discuss what the rationale was for that and make sure that we could explain and justify it after the fact. I then spent a good chunk of the winter working with Chad Brecklin, city administrator, as well as some other staff department heads on an implementation matrix. This is the biggest reason you haven't heard back in a while, is that we were working and putting together this implementation matrix that kind of lays out on sort of an action by action level what departments are going to be involved in each one of these action items if we're to carry forward with them, to what capacity they'll be involved in it, even what general resource lifts do we think this will be. What time do we think it could be implemented, sort of breaking it down into different tiers of action as well. Once we got all that put back together, then I was able to put together the memo that accompanied this plan. We have this final draft of the plan ready and prepared to take it to Common Council tomorrow night, following tonight's discussion and vote, and let them know what RCC thinks. There will be a discussion tomorrow night with Common Council. As you've already heard, availability of some alders was iffy for the rest of the month. So tomorrow's going to be the discussion with council, but the final vote on the sustainability plan won't be held until April 8th. So that'll give alders time to kind of ruminate on the conversation and get back to me or Chad with any comments, questions, suggestions before we are kind of putting together the final documents for vote. But instead of spending too much time talking about it, I can certainly walk through anything in the memo that I've got, or if you wanted to ask about anything else. But kind of wanted to just open it up to any conversation, questions right away, or Ted, if there's anything else that you think is worth highlighting from draft stage to now.
I thought you did a fantastic job. I would just throw out that, so through the review process, of course, as Phil mentioned, it was out for community review. We had online surveys, online review mechanism, and also the community meetings. And I will say that the reviews, the way the online reviews were set up, people could sort of self-select which sections they wanted to review, or they could go through and review all of the sections depending on what their interests were. And comments received through that process were, I think, overwhelmingly positive. There were a total of 82, I think, total responses. And by total response, it could be one individual reviewing just one section, or somebody reviewing 3 or 4 sections. Rarely did anybody review more than 2 or 3 sections, which is pretty common. And out of those total reviews received, it was overwhelmingly positive, with 97% either agreeing mostly or agreeing completely with the overall plan, and then 96% agreeing mostly or completely with all of the various sectors. So pretty strong support received.
Thanks, Ted. I guess something else I can do, instead of just leaving it overly broad, I can kind of give a high-level rundown of what any substantial changes might have been from the draft stage. So I kind of have some notes for myself here. Primarily what Ted and I worked through was just kind of editing, formatting changes if there were just little, I'll call myself out. I even get nitpicky about like spacing things. So I really looked at it with a fine-tooth comb. I think Bill already called it a couple things that I even missed. But a lot of it was just kind of that copy editing and looking at formatting and consistency and consistency with other Fitchburg documents, things like that. There were some changes to specific action items. What we tried to do as often as possible was adjust the language of the action item and not remove it outright. So there was one in buildings and energy, there was one that we removed because it just wasn't applicable enough to Fitchburg when we really thought about it. It referenced city land bank and utilizing vacant land for purposes. the city doesn't really have a land bank, and so that wasn't something that we felt was meaningful for Fitchburg. So we removed a couple like that. More often it was something like buildings and energy. 1.2 is about energy efficiency in multifamily housing, and the initial language referenced requiring energy efficiency in multi-housing for rental licensing, when we don't have rental licensing requirements in Fitchburg. So we didn't remove the action item, we just changed the language to provide a program, provide recommendations, education on efficiency in multifamily. We got rid of the requirement. So we did make some changes like that to certain action items. We did provide, the most common concern that I think I heard, especially from staff, had to do with just the scope of this is pretty broad. There are a lot of action items. We end up having, in the 8 categories, there are 175 action items over, I think, 43 goals, strategic goals. So that's the number that's more important there, is the 43 strategic goals. That's where we're looking to make measurable improvements. The action items are really just the initial slate of here's what we think we can do in Fitchburg to make progress on those 43 goals. And then another 13 action items within the cross-pollination category that Pale Blue Dot added in. But what Ted and I worked on adding here was using this plan section, adding language that kind of reflects that the fact that there are 175 action items in the sustainability plan does not mean that we are committing to 175 specific things over the next 5 years. That would be very overwhelming. It really is a menu of options for us to choose from. They are things that a combination of Pale Blue Dot, based on their experience with municipalities, and our planning team and our staff kind of together thought these are all things that are some combination of immediately addressable, reasonable to approach in the near future, and maybe really ambitious, but things that would be worth trying to accomplish if we can find the resources, the budget, and so on. And that's kind of how things got broken down into the tiers of action as well. So this was, I think, an important add, was just this sidebar and using this plan and making it clear that if this plan is passed, it does not mean that Fitchburg is committing to these 175 things all being done in the next 5 years. That would be, I think, I don't want to set myself up at a point where in 3 years I'm getting calls weekly, hey, why haven't you done all these things yet? You promised you would. And so kind of making clear that that's not the point of each of the specific action items, that we're immediately embracing it and saying we're going to put it in the CIP at some point in the next 2 years. So that was another significant edit from draft to final plan, is just kind of clarifying that, because we had gotten numerous questions. I anticipate we may get some tomorrow night with council as well, and I just wanted to make sure that was really clearly called out.
So Phil, how is this going to be used then within the city? Are departments going to come together and review and say, okay, these are the top 5 items I would like for this department to focus on, or the other part would come up with another 5? How are you working with intercity, within the city, to develop things, or put in the budget for next year or for the next couple of years, things like that?
So that's a work in progress, and that's where the implementation plan that I started working on with Chad and other staff was important there. I can share this as well. There is one screenshot of this in the supporting memo. I have a few columns here. So this is just an example with transportation and land use. So kind of throwing together for each one of these action items, and this first one, establish a complete streets policy to guide planning, design, building, operating, et cetera, of streets for safe use for all users, whether you're driving, walking, biking, skateboarding, a complete streets policy. And we identified when do we think we could potentially start that, how much time and money, roughly on a 1 to 3 point scale do I think it would take, who would be involved in this and who would be leading it, do we have any external partners identified. Each one of these action items has been broken down this way and given a tier as well, whether we think it's tier 1, 2, or 3, and that kind of represents the immediacy of the action. What will need to happen, and we didn't want to make a decision about this too soon because we want to make sure that all of city leadership, not just Chad, but also alders and the mayor, if they have strong feelings about this, have a chance to weigh in on how this is done. Initially, what's going to happen is I'm going to make sure that I am making this my North Star. This document is what I'm going to spend more of my time on now, is working on, all right, now that I've got this sort of prioritization of action items by tier and by lift, what do I think is the most urgent, what aligns with things that are already being done, and we have a number of those, probably 30 items out of the 175, we're already making progress on, or at least have plans to in the near future. So those are at the top of the list. But then I'll also be making sure that I'm regularly getting more time with city leadership, with department heads to talk through these things, and that we're collaborating, that we're putting our heads together and working through that. In the past, the city has had a green team. It was a little bit more of a volunteer ad hoc thing at that point, more for just sort of internal municipal things. It's possible that we may decide that's the best way to move forward, and we would try to have department representatives meet on a regular basis, whether that's quarterly or biennially, to talk about implementing and tracking progress on each of the action items and the strategic goals. That has not been decided yet, but there are a few different possibilities that I've talked with Chad and Deanna and some others about, and we just kind of need to. So I think I had mentioned this already at the last meeting. I'm not positive. I'm going to be going out on FMLA leave at the end of April, so that's going to mean that there's a little bit of a gap there between this being approved and me being able to really dive in on it in full force. Hopefully, I don't plan to spend all of my parental leave time thinking about work, but it'll also give me a little more time when my brain is functional to kind of think about that as well, about how I want to jump back into it when I return. But it's something we're already discussing without I would say a firm commitment yet.
I'll throw out a couple of comments here. I was, this is a large number of actions, but most of them, I'm gonna say the majority of them didn't seem like they were insurmountable at all, really. Some of the goals seemed a little timid. I think I mentioned this, I guess, so when you had your committee of citizens working on this, they were broken up into different groups. So transportation and land use was one group of people, and building energy was another group. And that contrast was very interesting because transportation and land use said, hey, let's try and get a population density increase of 3%. And we may have hit that already. The population listed in the document was under 31,000. As of January of 24, the DOA estimated we had 35,000 people. By now we've got 16% more population than was listed in the document, and if we haven't expanded out at that same rate, we might have already hit that goal. So, but then, you get into buildings and energy, and they're saying by 2030, 100% of the municipal electricity should come from renewables. Well, that seems like a much bigger task, especially given the police facility, which, we're only gonna be able to cover something like 30% of the energy use with the solar panels that we're able to put on there. So that one, again, it's interesting, some of the goals, easy versus difficult.
And we did, so there are eight different organizing sectors. Everybody who participated in the planning team participated in 2 of those, and it was based on interests and expertise, familiarity with the area. But then even once those groups came up with their high-level strategic goals, those were all discussed as an entire group, and so there was collaboration between everyone there. I can speak to the electricity one more specifically, and then kind of address more broadly. I guess initially more broadly, there might be some differences in perceived ambition of the different goals. We tried to make sure that they were all a combination of achievable and ambitious, and I think to different people, each of the different figures fell differently on that scale. Some people said, well, we want to, our current energy stressed population is 8%, and the plan said, let's drop that to 4% by 2030. And some members said, why not drop it to 0? It's like, well, yes, of course, that would be ideal. That would be the goal. But where do you feel it's reasonable? We try to hit on that range. And it does change for different people. We tried to balance that out. With the electrification, we tried to stay true to the 2019 Clean Energy Resolution, which called for Fitchburg to reach 100% renewable electricity by 2030. I think that is very ambitious. I do not believe we'll do it on our own through installation of renewables on city facilities. What that means is we require partnerships with MG&E, and it means that we may look at what is the budgetary impact of purchasing renewable energy credits to buy down the remainder of our fossil fuel percentage once we hit 2030. Dane County, I know, has hit 100% renewable already. I think they're the first county in the country to be 100% renewable electricity, and a portion of that they did through renewable energy offsets.
I was gonna ask if you saw that article.
Yeah.
Said Sun Prairie is the first municipality in Wisconsin to reach 100%. And it didn't go into detail, so I don't know whether they were purchasing offsets as well.
It's certainly a viable approach for getting there, and it might be something, I don't know the exact number, but maybe we'd say, all right, well, if we put $30,000 to $40,000 a year into purchasing renewable energy credits, that would take us from 45% to 100%. And that could be the approach that we take, and that's something that could be presented to council once we get to a point where we say, there's just not really anything else we can bite off here. The rest of it, we're just waiting on the utility, so in the meantime, maybe let's purchase these credits. So there are approaches we can take, but that one specifically, the reason that it's at 100%, besides the fact that we recognize that climate change is an existential threat, and especially when there's uncertainty about how it's being addressed at a federal level, states and municipalities really need to do their part to try and address that however they can. We also just wanted to not come at this 5 years after that clean energy resolution and say we've already reduced our goals. That was one that we felt there are avenues to get to 100%, and so it just didn't feel right to say we're already gonna cut our targets by 20% from what they were when I started in this position.
When the O'Brien solar fields added on, the rough jump seems like it was from 20% to 40%.
Roughly there, yeah.
Very roughly.
Yep. And that'll, as Bill referenced, that'll drop slightly when we get the police services facility. That will, I think, immediately become our #1 electricity user for all specific individual city facilities. Right now, I believe City Hall is #1 at around 500,000 kilowatt hours a year. Now, a portion of that is our police department in the basement, but the police facility, I think, will be in the 600,000 or 700,000 kilowatt hours a year range. So that means our 40% will immediately drop down a little bit lower. But
I think, so I went back and read the latest projections, and it said, that it's expected to consume 600 and some thousand. Is that inclusive of, is that factoring in the 30% that we should be able to offset with the solar, or was that wrong?
So it's expected to consume, I don't remember the exact number, but 600,000 to 700,000 kilowatt hours, and 30% of that will be produced by the solar panels on the rooftop.
Okay, so net then it's in the 400-something thousand range.
Net is somewhere in the 400,000 range,
okay.
Right? And so if that's 30%, citywide right now we're around 40%. That means that with the police facility added in, that drops us to maybe 37. But again, at the same time, MG&E and to a lesser degree Alliant provide our electricity. Those utilities keep increasing the percent of their grid mix that is renewable, and so it's all a little bit horse trading here and there.
That's why it's calculated. It's a moving target.
I think we're going to hover still around 40% for a few more years until another significant development comes along.
And that's for the city, for residents where it's harder to. I do like that you have a community solar goal in BE4. So like Chris's mother and I live in a community where, a condo community where it's disallowed. I can't even put solar in my community, so having a community solar option.
Disallowed by the condo association or by legislation?
In the bylaws, I believe.
Okay.
Of the condo association?
Yeah, when it was formed, 18 years ago.
But the bylaws can be changed. There is a process for that, right?
There is a process. It takes somebody like me. It takes a lot of work, but anyway, and sorry to take this from 75 to 76 goals, I'd like to see in BE3 strategy not a commitment, but looking at also doing community geothermal pilot, almost use the exact same language as your community solar, but do it for city-owned land, and look for a community geothermal project with a residential property, or not a apartment complex, or whatever it is. I believe that should also be a goal, because fuel switching and reducing, heating is just a huge fossil fuel, and geothermal is one of the only ways to reduce that.
And something like that is a great example where that really helps to, so the strategy BE3, I don't have it up on the screen right now, but the strategy BE3 that Jim's referencing has to do with 15% residential and C&I fuel switching from on-site fossil fuel combustion to electrification by 2030. Geothermal is one of the primary means by which you accomplish fuel switching, certainly with new development especially. That's a perfect example of how maybe even roadmap would have been a better title than plan for this, because it is flexible. There is that ability to say, hey, if something comes along where we realize there is an opportunity to push geothermal in a way that's not reflected in here, that doesn't mean we can't do it. That's going to help accomplish that goal in strategy BE3. And so if something is, if we have an opportunity to push something that will help us get there, we're not going to be held back by the fact that it isn't already listed as an action item under BE3. That's still something that we would absolutely take advantage of.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a couple questions for Phil. I don't know if you know these off the top of your head, but like roughly how many permits do we issue in a given year for residential solar? Do you know that?
Oh man, I know I asked Jack Pearson about this maybe a year and a half ago, and he gave me the number, and I want to say it's in the like 50-ish range, 50 or 60, but I might be way off. That's what's sticking in my head, but I'd have to go back to building inspection to ask.
Okay, and then the other question, some friends of mine who live out near Quarry Hill Park, there was a brand new neighborhood. So their house was constructed in like 2020, something like that, and they wanted solar on their rooftop. The builder told them it was not allowed. They brought it to city staff, who said, "What are you talking about? Of course it's allowed." So I wonder, if you have any insight as to why a developer might want to prevent people from having solar.
I couldn't tell you why a developer would discourage solar. I can't say if this is the case right now. I'm not up to speed on this. I know that in the past there have been concerns where neighborhood associations might try to discourage residents from putting solar on the rooftops because they're concerned about the aesthetics. That is specifically disallowed by state statute. We make sure that on our website we provide solar resources. We link anybody who sees those resources. We link them to state policy on here are requirements for solar. Here's also what is allowed and not allowed, and so it's very clear where in what situations your right to install solar on your own property can't really be obstructed.
Okay.
I don't believe we specifically go communicate to all developers who are working in Fitchburg about the laws regarding solar installation. I'd hope that they're all up to speed on that. I couldn't tell you why a developer would maybe discourage that if they may have been mistaken, and it might have been just an honest mistake.
Okay.
I don't know.
If I may also, I've run into some, I don't know that this is the case there, but in this particular instance, but I have run into some instances where developers discourage putting solar on the homes or buildings that they are currently building. So in other words, if I'm gonna buy a house from them and I'm negotiating with them before the construction, some developers are not interested in getting in solar because it's not a part of their wheelhouse. They don't have, the subcontractors on board, and they frankly just don't want to get into it. So I don't know what the specific was of that, but it could be something like that that's happening, where the house is yet to be built or it's under construction and developers just not interested in engaging that.
Okay.
I'll say one additional thing now that I'm thinking back to it. I'm glad that the way you asked your question, Jim, made me think of talking about the residential and commercial goals in addition to municipal ones. I think that's really important to call out with this plan. This is not a municipal only plan. Some of these goals do reflect the broader Fitchburg community. The municipality is going to do our best to support additional renewable energy development in the broader community and electrification, through education and outreach primarily. If there are opportunities to incentivize, we'd like to be able to do that. Kind of want to minimize how much we're using regulations, restrictions, mandates, things like that. But because this is a community plan and not just municipality, that's why we had a planning team that included a lot of community members. It's also a great example for, again, that kind of roadmap, maybe primacy over plan, that this is not something that the city can be held to, because not everything in here is owned by the city. There are items that partners are going to be taking the lead on. There are things with the food and agriculture section that this is really something Dane County's leading, and I'd like to make sure that if staff isn't up to speed on it, and we should be, that we are, but there are things that are being led by other individuals, and so the city can't, sign in blood a document that's committing other people to action. So that's something that I think is unique about this plan versus maybe some others that the city passes, is that it's something that is more of a collaborative plan. And even though it's something that the city led the approach, the city led the development of it, the city's going to vote on it. It still recognizes kind of the collaborative community environment in which it takes place.
Two of the things that are in the plan that I really love are the idea of having group purchase programs for solar and for electrification. So, get a heat pump, get a heat pump water heater, heat pump dryer, whatever. I think maybe the RCC could help lead some of that education and outreach and running of that program.
And there are groups, Renew Wisconsin already does this, Legacy Solar Co-op already does this. There are probably other groups. There are groups that are doing group purchase programs right now. So, trying to figure out ways that we can help to promote those or encourage other groups to get on board. What are they doing that's working? How do we emulate that? Yeah, I think those are really powerful ways to get more people on board with something that maybe they just wouldn't feel like they could approach on their own.
Yeah, it is easier for solar. Geothermal is much more institutionally difficult, because you're talking $20,000 in drilling, long payback times, 10, 11 years. But what I'm saying, as far as like a group buy, if there was a community that 20 people out of 1,000 wanted geothermal, your mobilization is so much better.
But electrification, if you're talking about heat pump water heaters or air source heat pumps and upgrading electrical boxes, that could be done in a group buy much more easily.
Yeah, but I'm also saying
geothermal, yeah.
Geothermal is you get 10 people to get one drill rig and commit them for 1 month and do here and then here.
You'd almost have to include it in a new development.
Yeah, the self-storage.
That's what it would take to get much more market penetration.
One thing that I kind of feel like in the transportation and land use sector, it really ought to be land use and transportation, because what drives transportation is land use. And, but in the United States, sprawl accounts for 50% of US household greenhouse gas emissions, and that is primarily from everybody having to drive a car to do everything. Single-family homes, of course, that's another big chunk for the heating and cooling, just because it's all 5 sides of the house that are exposed to the weather. But I kind of feel like land use should be, the top dog in that section.
Although I could contest that it was the highway project and kind of increased use of single-family cars, getting away from trolley cars and kind of city rail that led to the sprawl that we've got now. I think it could kind of go either way. The current suburban sprawl we have was only made possible by, you know, every family owning 2 vehicles that wanted to move out of the city. You weren't gonna have sprawl if everybody was still relying on buses, and
Yeah.
it kind of, it's a bit of a chicken or egg. But yeah, it's an interesting, it certainly is worthwhile thinking about in terms of the city's approach to how do we help address that moving forward.
Yeah, because the overall point is the best way to reduce VMT is to remove the need for it. And that's land use.
All right, any other discussion on this?
No, I think it's an exceptionally good job and just well done. Where we're at is very advanced.
A lot of good resources in there. In the what you can do sections, all those links in there, taking you to some useful websites.
Oh, yeah, that brings up the one other thing I didn't mention. So resources there for individuals reading it. So the plan primarily is staff is gonna reference this for how we move forward as a municipality. At the end of each section, there's that what you can do that is for anybody else reading this, how do I make changes in my own life? In terms of resources, we also have a great action finder tool that Ted and Pale Blue Dot have put together. And this basically, for every one of the action items we're looking at, this will let us know, are there other communities they've worked with that's worked on this as well? And so we have kind of a built-in list, a built-in Rolodex of who we can reach out to if we're just really not sure how to approach something. There's a pretty good chance that somebody else that Pale Blue Dot has worked with has already approached this, and so we can always reach out to them. We interface a lot with our Dane County neighbors, so we've got a great collaborative thing going on there. But this will hopefully open up some communication channels to others as well.
Any other discussion?
Well, I just want to thank Phil, I've been with him since his beginning of his time here. And, this has been, even dating back further before Phil, when Diane and I were, on RCC back in the early 2010s.
It's like 08 or 09, I think, was the first time RCC asked for this, right?
So 08, 09, we had the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And that was driving some of the actions that we were taking as a community with sustainability that really got us going, started signing, different components. But then we quickly realized we had somebody from the Next Step Sustainability come in and say, this community really needs a sustainability plan. And we had a lot of resistance at the time with the council at that time to moving this forward. So we started with trying to get staff in place. And so that started with the intern. And we realized there was a big learning curve every year, and then we'd have to kind of start that back over. And so then we moved to a staff person, and then a staff person like yourself. So that only increased over time. And I think the value of that has been that you've got a really good vision in terms of what you wanted to do. You knew how Fitchburg worked and knew how this would best operate for Fitchburg. So commend you for your efforts in trying, seeing this through, working and selecting somebody like Pale Blue Dot to do such a fine job with it. And, it's exciting for me, going back however long, this is 15 years now in the making of, this plan being in place. And it's a big accomplishment, but I think in the end we could have, we got a really good plan, even though it's a little late coming to Fitchburg. We do have a good plan that we can carry forward. And we have a lot of people that, know a lot about the community and have put a lot of detail and effort into this. And so I think we're pretty lucky to have the plan that we do right now that we can kind of carry forward. I do like the terminology roadmap instead of plan. So kudos to both of you and your efforts on it, as the RCC historian at this point.
Yeah, I kicking it off all those years ago.
It took a while.
Yeah, I echo Chris's thought. I want to thank you, Phil, for all your hard work. Ted, and all the work that you guys done at Pale Blue Dot. Really a nice document. Very informative and
Thank you very much.
set the stage for us for the next 6 years. So thank you, guys. Anything else?
Thank you very much. And I would echo, Phil did a fantastic job. He's really put in a lot of effort. So
Thanks.
Don, go ahead and take a vote on approving the resolution. All in favor of approving resolution R-4625, the City of Fitchburg Sustainability Plan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, so it's approved through RCC. Thank you again, Ted.
Thanks a lot, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah.
thank you all.
Okay, next on the agenda, item 4C, review of the 2024 MS4 drafts annual report. Ben?
Excellent, I'll share my screen here. All right, so again, this is the annual report that is submitted to fulfill requirement NR 216, that's the Wisconsin pollutant discharge elimination system permit for the city of Fitchburg's MS4. Each year the city submits a report to the DNR, basically outlining the compliance measures for the previous year. So this report is basically a summary of permit activities for 2024. So we can kind of scroll through some of this. It's just contact information. But basically, if anyone was here, I had done a presentation on the stormwater utility, I guess last month only, seems longer, but there's basically 6 minimum control measures that are outlined in the WIPD's permit. So these minimum control measures are kind of, as it implies, the minimum things that a city needs to be doing to be compliant with the MS4 WIPD's permit. So one of those is public outreach and education. So here we're just reporting on the total number of educational events. So there was 25. Many of those were completed through MAMSWAP and by the Dane County Education Coordinator that the city of Fitchburg contributes to. And then there were some other ones that were done on, that Fitchburg did on their own. For example, we hosted the Confluence, the Rock River Coalition's annual conference and had a lot of people come in to give presentations. And just kind of a good networking event for people that are interested in getting involved in, either the Rock River Coalition or other kind of citizen science type activities. So anything like that would be included in this education section. So every permit term, the city has to cover at least one time in all those 8 years, each one of these different topics. So, I think we did a pretty good job at covering most of them this year. We didn't necessarily have a green infrastructure, low impact development focused event. So that would be, something that we would look to do in another year. But basically we want to be hitting on all of these topics. For the permit, we have to do 6 of these topics a year, so that's kind of the basis for that. Again, one of the next minimum control measure here is public involvement and participation. Very similar to public education and outreach, but this, an example of this would be, even today, sharing the draft report and having that be available publicly on FACTv, posting the past reports on the city website, doing things like the stormwater utility presentation or the TMDL presentation to the committee of the whole. Any opportunity to get the public to come in and learn more, ask questions about the MS4 permit. So, another one is the waterway cleanup. So every year the city, has to hold an event, basically an in-person event. So the waterway cleanup is kind of checks that box. So that's kind of what this section is. Another component, another minimum control measure is the illicit discharge detection and elimination, which is the large piece of that is the outfall screening. So what we do, we wait in the summer until there's been 72 hours without rain. We go to all of the outfalls on our list for that given year, and we basically take a look, see, there shouldn't be any water coming out because it's been dry. We take notes if there is any kind of discharge. We do have a test kit that can test for some common different pollutants.
It seems like 19 are only tested out of 265.
So there's 265 total outfalls. Now, many of these, 265, some of them are literally one inlet in the street with a pipe that just discharges. So that's considered, there's two classes of outfalls per the DNR. There's minor and major. A major outfall, which we've got 78 of, either has to be 36 inches in diameter or greater, the pipe itself, or there has to be a contributing area that is made up of at least a certain percentage of industrial, or there's a certain acreage of industrial land use draining to that outfall, because there's going to be a higher likelihood of some type of a discharge.
So is there a system where eventually all get tested?
Yes, so we have the city broken up into 3 zones. Zone 3 was what we did in 2024, and that's actually the zone with the least amount of outfalls, which is why there was 19 that we screened. So that zone is south of PD. If you imagine that PD went, the whole distance across the city, it's south of PD and east of Fish Hatchery. So there's not as many major outfalls in that area compared to especially Zone 1. So that's like north of McKee, there's quite a few more. But every 3 years then we screen all the major outfalls, plus some of the minor ones, because even if we're not as concerned about an illicit discharge, we still want to, see what kind of condition that infrastructure is in. And then how many screenings did we confirm illicit discharge? We had 0 confirmed illicit discharges from our screenings this year. We thought we had maybe 1. It turned out it was, someone washing their car. Or we had another occasion where it was the water utility flushing a hydrant, right? So if you see an illicit discharge, then you can trace it back, try to figure out where it's coming from. And in those 2 cases, we figured out it was not from, it wasn't an illicit discharge.
Is that what E and F are? 1?
Yeah. Well, so the 1, we did have an illicit discharge. It wasn't found during the screening. It was actually during construction of the McKee tennis court, the McKee Farms Park tennis court that they redid. It was a kind of a latex type chemical that they put on the surface to kind of prevent from cracking. And they put it on, it didn't dry properly, and some of it did spill out or kind of washed out into the grass. So we contacted the DNR. We sent them the safety data sheet for that chemical. They provided us, luckily it wasn't something super harmful. So essentially all we had to do was suck up with trash pumps as much as we possibly could into the tank. That was more or less all we had to do, but.
Was that the vendor was responsible for that?
Yeah, the contractor should not
Did they
have.
reimburse the city for that, or?
No, but they had to do it, they had to do the work to clean it up.
Oh,
So
okay.
the city didn't clean it up,
Okay.
they had to do all the cleanup work.
Okay.
But, you know, that would be an example of, you know, an actual kind of a illicit discharge, and it was just an honest mistake. They shouldn't have done it before it rained, but.
What's the definition of an illicit discharge? Is it based on some particular pollutants, or is it just the fact that somebody's draining water? You know, like if somebody drains their sump into the street sewer, is that an illicit discharge?
No, so basically it'd definitely be easier to list the things that aren't illicit discharges than are. There is a list that the DNR provides of, like, there's many common things, for example, washing your car. Even though there may be some chemicals involved, that's not seen as an illicit discharge. If you are draining your pool, you're supposed to let it dechlorinate, so it you know, just basically you just have to not add chlorine for a while and let it be open to the air. But once you do that, you know, that's not an illicit discharge. So there's a list of things that aren't, and then really if it's, you know, if someone's dumping concrete wash water down a storm drain, that's an illicit discharge. Really anything that isn't clean water, storm water, with the exception of a few things that, like the car washing or the pool water or sump pump discharge. Yes.
I mean, do you guys encounter like leaks in the system coming in through cracked pipes and things like that? You know, groundwater's coming in, infiltration, and
We haven't so far. I haven't seen that yet. You know, the most common kind of spill we see is honestly just from hydraulic leaks from a truck, really. And in those cases, we just document it. We make sure it gets cleaned up. You know, who was the company, when did it occur, taking some before and after photos. That seems to be the most common type of potential for an illicit discharge that I've seen, at least.
It's an interesting question. In the sustainability plan, there was mention in there that research has shown that up to 12% of all the water in a municipal distribution system is lost to leaks. And that's for drinking water. Do we have a handle on how much leakage there is in our stormwater system? We don't televise those, right? We televise the sanitary sewer lines?
Sanitary is on a schedule for televising. Storm sewer, we more so just televise if we suspected that there could be an issue. You know, if storm sewer is leaking from, I guess, the environmental perspective, well, that's just more infiltration potentially, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'd be concerned,
upstream is the illicit
unless
discharge.
there's an illicit discharge upstream, right? But I'd be more concerned that, Jesus, is the pipe flawed? Is it gonna break? Is there you know, is there a break at a joint, and then you're gonna get you know, a pothole over that? Yeah, I am not sure about, you know, the percentage of you know, water loss just while being conveyed through the pipe. I couldn't answer that. All right, so the next control measure is construction site pollutant control. This one I did have to get some numbers back from Dane County on to finish this. But as far as total construction sites, 1 acre or more, we had up to 21 in 2024. And then last year we permitted 14. So these numbers just don't match because there were some that were permitted in 2023 that were still ongoing.
so see, there's the box is not filled out. We didn't do any erosion control.
That's the number I need from Dane County.
Oh,
so they
okay.
compile
Okay.
their total number of inspections that they
gotcha.
performed. Last time it was like 400 or something.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting to fill that in.
Okay.
Yeah, you can tell they must have done some inspections because D has boxes checked and numbers filled in.
Yeah.
These ones were citations that I, put out, so I know those numbers. The Dane County, although they do our inspections, they can't write the citations. That has to come from the city. So basically, I've got kind of my own number of verbal warnings, written warnings, and then they'll get me their info, combine it together, put it in here. And that's, more or less the information that gets submitted for that section of the report. Fifth minimum control measure is the post-construction stormwater management. So, first question, how many new structural stormwater BMPs received local approval? We had 11, so there were 4 in the Hartung development. Those were kind of the main ones because those are going to be city-owned. And then there were just some others in some of the other, like the climbing gym had a rain garden. The learning center over off of Nobel had a rain garden. So any structural BMP gets included in this list as well.
While we're talking about that, I noticed some verbiage in here that said the MS4 has maintenance authority over privately owned BMPs. Does that mean we do the maintenance or we oversee and make sure the maintenance gets done?
So any private property with a private BMP that has a maintenance agreement with the city, which the city now requires for any new construction, part of that maintenance agreement gives the city authority to do inspections and actually do work. It basically creates an easement over those BMPs for the city. So, not all the private BMPs have maintenance agreements, particularly the older ones, before the city was getting these maintenance agreements. So, in that case, no, we don't, but by and large, the city does have the authority to complete inspections on the behalf of the property owner or even do work.
Okay, I mean, what's the normal course of events? Like if it's a private thing, would they normally do that? I'm just thinking that this could be a big expense for the city to do work on behalf of private entities.
If the city hasn't done that yet, done work on behalf, but if that were to occur, it's listed right out in the maintenance agreement, it's the responsibility of the property owner to then pay for that work.
Okay,
so the city would bill that.
So we would do the work and we would bill them for it.
Yep. And that kind of brings up an interesting point. So now that the city has taken credit in our new TMDL modeling of certain BMPs, we really need to make sure that they are sending in the annual reports each year. So that's part of the maintenance agreement. They've agreed to send in annual reports each year. And for the most part, they do. But sometimes it can be challenging to get an annual report or...
Does that come to you or the DNR?
It'll come to the city, okay. Yeah. So for example, in 2024, it looks like there were 138 privately owned BMPs inspected last year. So that's not the number of sites. Like there might be a site that has 6 different BMPs that would be included in that 138.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it makes it sound like it's a ton. It's actually not that many sites. It's just I count each individual BMP that's on that site. So for the most part, we're getting them, but now that we are taking credit, we'll probably have to look into hiring a vendor to complete inspections if we're not getting them in a timely manner. If it comes to it, we'll have to do that. And that kind of ties into like what I was saying in question D here. Does the municipality utilize privately owned storm water management BMPs like we currently do now? And yes, and again, the maintenance authority question.
So do you guys follow up on the written warnings to make sure that they were corrected or?
action was taken?
Yeah, and it depends on what the issue is. So for example, there was a site last year, they had their annual inspection reported. It noted they needed, they didn't have they had like turf grass. They needed to get native plantings in their bio basin. They also had to kind of clear out some of the top layer. It had been a little bit silted in. It was a fairly large basin, so we'll kind of work with that property owner to come up with a realistic time frame to get that corrected. Obviously this stuff is not cheap, so we try to work with them, and then depending on if it's not like a wet pond that is a public safety issue that it's gonna the side is gonna unleash this torrent of water. If that's the case, then okay, this needs to be corrected now. But most cases we can kind of work with the property owner to come up with a fair schedule to get these things corrected. And then when they go to do their annual report the following year, then we would want to see that noted, that those changes were made.
We've got about 5 minutes.
Okay, get through here quick. The sixth control measure is pollution prevention. So this is kind of with the city's own BMPs. We've got 97 of them here. Installed 4 in 2024. So those were the Hartung ones I mentioned. Those will be owned are owned by the city. We inspected 50 of them last year. We had 34 of the 50 that required some maintenance.
That seems like a lot.
The vast majority of the required maintenance was vegetation related. So, one thing that we really want to make sure of is that there's not any vegetation kind of obscuring the outlet structure. So if you imagine you've got this concrete outlet structure, it's got an orifice on it. We want to make sure that there's not kind of vegetation growing around that or anything that could obstruct it. Same with the outfall pipes, into a pond. We don't really want woody vegetation growing near there, anything that could kind of disturb the infrastructure. So yeah, I'll have to go look back at the spreadsheet, but I bet 90% of those are clean up some vegetation.
So I presume the same sort of a ratio probably holds for all the private.
It is a lot of vegetation management, yeah. This also gets into the city's stormwater pollution prevention plan. So the stormwater pollution prevention plan was specifically drafted for the maintenance facility on Fishhatchery Road. They have some stored containers of fuel, oil, and because of that, it requires this specific plan. So there's monthly reports or inspections really that are completed of the tanks and any of the chemicals that are outlined in the SWIP. Those containers are inspected. We meet every year. We'll have another meeting here coming up soon, just with anyone listed in the SWIP. So that'd be myself, that'd be our street supervisor, our park supervisor, director of public works. Anyone that can be involved in the SWIP, we'll go over, we'll read through it, see if anything changed. Everything's stored in the same place. They don't have any new tanks, anything like that. And if there are any changes, we make those updates. And then the other piece, there's a couple other pieces here. So street sweeping, how much material was removed? 315 tons. It's a ton of material. Yep, it's.
Where's that disposed of?
Dane County land. Yeah. They ask about the catch basin cleaning. So we cleaned 57 of them. This is an estimate. We don't weigh that. We're kind of basing this off of cubic yards, but we're guessing around 2 tons of material from the sumps. Leaf collection, basically just saying that yes, we do have a leaf collection program and kind of how it works. And then
On that, the 315 tons of disposal, do they use that just as a cap material? They don't usually, it's fill material, do they?
no,
They fill up the landfill very quickly, which is.
they kind of just use it as cover,
Yeah.
cover material.
I think it do the cover material. I don't know if they use, if they exactly use, do you know if they use it as a daily cover?
I believe that's what I understand, yeah.
I mean, it is generally used because there is so many soil components to it that it's like helpful to provide, because a lot of times landfills are short of having enough daily cover.
Yeah.
So rather than just digging up, soil.
And it is basically, it looks like dirt when you look at it.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
It looks like sandy dirt.
Yeah.
So often landfills are looking for these things that they can put to cover up the waste. And I think they try to reuse it, like they'll, oftentimes they'll scrape it back and use it as many times as they can.
Okay.
But, it's a pretty important component of the landfilling process. That we, I don't see like on the international level. So like it's really important that, we do it and, it's a nice use of that material.
Okay.
They also ask about the salt. So that's information that we track, how much salt is getting used.
Is that October 23 through March of 24 there?
Correct. Yep, so pretty mild outside of January where we had, that snow event and then it got really cold and salt was going down before it got too cold to put the salt down at least. But I mean, these are actually really, really low numbers and really that's just driven almost completely by the weather. And, just talking through any kind of training that we did. So in October, we had Allison Madison with Saltwise come into Fitchburg and folks from a bunch of other municipalities attend a Smart Salting for Roads session. We talk about just kind of general. This is kind of, sharing information in the pollution prevention plan, which is what I discussed previously with kind of our annual meeting with anyone that has responsibilities in that SWIP to kind of meet, go over it, refresh, see if anything needs to be changed. And those are basically the minimum control measures there. Budget section, I gotta, I guess, fill out those two columns here, but they basically just want to know how many dollars the city has earmarked for basically meeting these certain minimum control measures. So, it's kind of, some of them are more straightforward than others. For example, the city doesn't have a illicit discharge detection and elimination budget per se, but these are mostly just estimates. Some of them are a little bit more clear cut.
Yeah, I was looking at Appendix D for 2025 budget items. Seems like there's a lot in there for vegetation management. That's just like burning the prairies and
it's
mowing and.
Yeah, so it's burning, herbicide if needed, interseeding, reseeding if needed, mowing. Yeah, it does add up for sure. It is kind of one of the bigger operating costs for these facilities. And then it just asks some general questions here. So there's no known water quality improvements or degradation. There haven't been any receiving waters added to and impaired the 303D, that's the DNR's impaired waters list.
We're getting a couple minutes over here.
Okay. But I guess I'll just say if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything about, the MS4 permit, the activities that the city has done. If there are any questions, just feel free to reach out. More than happy to talk about all this stuff.
Okay. We've never had an issue of DNR coming back to say that's not complete or. Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
Good job, Dan.
One quick question. I wrote down a note here, but I don't know where in this document it was, but it asked if the modeling was updated for 2024, and the answer was no.
Yeah, so the reason I put no there is because the TMDL model does not encompass the entirety of the MS4 geographic area. So the western part of Fitchburg that basically drains to, Story Creek or Badger Mill, Sugar River, is not part of the TMDL. So while we did do our update, it wasn't the entire MS4.
All right.
Are there any action items coming out of this for anything? I'm just trying to. No, I didn't hear any. I just want to make sure.
No, not so much. Just it's due the 31st. I'll finish it up this week. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for providing the update on that. Nice job. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5A, Fitchburg Farmers Market Organics Collection. Chris, you want to give us an update on that?
So as you recall, or may recall, last year we had Sustained Dane. Samantha Warden had come and presented and said that there was a couple of organics collections locations in Madison, so they tied them to Madison farmers markets. And basically, it was kind of on the people attending the markets to bring their food. They've done this now in the last couple of summers and gotten pretty large numbers of food waste that they've been able to collect. And because they have it staffed with people, they can take any contamination out of there, and provide feedback on what's contamination and what's not. So generally they have a pretty clean organics stream through that collection process. And they came and presented to us and asked if Fitchburg would be interested in doing it at our farmers market. And this was kind of like, midsummer, and we were gonna run to the end of the year, but we didn't have a lot of luck getting in touch with the people that ran the Fitchburg Farmers Market, which is, I think is partly off of the Promega team. And so then, I asked them if they could follow up and try to see if they could make some additional headway, and they have made some headway. The Fitchburg Farmers Market is excited about the potential of doing this.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So now, she provided a few budget scenarios for us. So if we wanted to do a pilot over 12 weeks, 16 weeks, or 20 weeks. So if I'm kind of putting things together in my mind, let's say we're starting maybe June 1st, we can run it through the summer months, and that would be roughly 12 weeks. If we want to run it through kind of the start of the fall harvest, we could run it through, the end of September, and then basically the end of October would be kind of the three options. And I looked through the packet, but I don't know if I saw that got into the packet. Oh, it is it. Good. Yep. So those costs are, I don't know if you can kind of zoom into those. I don't have it up right now. But that's like, what is it?
Yeah, we got about 10,000, about 12.5, and about 15,000.
That's for 12, 16, and 20 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty confident we could find 10. I don't know if this is something that could, potentially receive some grant funding through Dane County. I haven't looked at their organics. I know they had an organics collection grant at one point. I don't know if that's something they're still doing, but I could look into that as well.
Yeah, I think we would have to look into that. That was a source of funding that I thought of. So, I mean, the main discussion today is like, I think that we're generally interested, unless somebody opposes, I think we're generally interested in trying to do this and be part of this pilot and part of this organics number that, we're keeping out of landfills. So, the question is like, how do we fund this? So there's, I'm thinking that, in the past when we did our organics collection pilot back in 2012, we did dip into the solid waste, fund that we had. So that would be one way to do it. There's the pilot, or the grant program that Dane County has. So my thought was, let's start with 12 weeks, and then if we can find some additional funding, we'll extend it out, another month or two, depending on what else we can give, and maybe even like Promega wants to pitch in, but like, in this case, we need to be kind of the fire starters, and then, kind of see how it's going, and then we can maybe get some more energy in terms of, supporting the funding to run it, kind of the season. So my thought was, what do we need to do next to get that, 12-week amount approved? What are those steps? And basically our timeline is, let's try to, I'm thinking like June 1st, we get it going. Normally the first month of farmers market's kind of slow. And that gives us some time to do some educational outreach as well. April's gonna be pretty busy, and then that gives us May to really kind of jump in and do some of that stuff.
I think that sounds pretty doable. I guess was that in your email that the Fitchburg Farmers Market folks were on board? Did I just completely miss that, or did you just?
No, it was in there.
Okay, I guess I just.
I might have not given too much reading into it. Like I sent a forward email and be like, put this in the packet.
Okay, well I guess I just missed that. Okay, well awesome. That was kind of the hurdle. So I think
that was our hurdle.
I think by June 1st sounds very realistic. Certainly, this is not. Seems pretty reasonable price-wise, but yeah, I'll look into that Dane County opportunity. That'll be the first thing I do.
Okay.
See where that can get us, but that's great.
So I think, what are our procedural steps to, if we have to dip into our, I don't think that we put this into our operational budget last year. Like, I'm pretty sure we didn't.
It's not, but I can see, there's different accounts and there's money in education and outreach. I kind of see this as somewhat education and outreach, just teaching people about food waste diversion.
Right.
So I think that's a valid source.
Can also tie into our food waste and organics annual event as well, so we can kind of tie all those things together. So, the challenge is, like this is our last meeting probably until May 10th or so, and so, right, because we don't have an April meeting.
Right.
So, just, how do we get it approved, in the meantime, so that, we can give Sustained Dayton the heads up and they can get kind of their staffing and their game plan in place to take this one on. Yeah, so depending on, the dollars that need to get moved from what account to where, it could be something as simple if we don't really have to do too much, moving of funds. It could just be a memo, essentially, very simple. If they're, I don't really think there will be a need for like a resolution for council to authorize funds. We're under $10,000.
Right, exactly. So I think I think it could be as simple as a budget amendment, a budget memo. It's not an insurmountable amount of money. Let me just take this and I'll kind of run with it the next couple of weeks here and see what we can get figured out. And
right, I mean, I guess worst case scenario, if we had to have like a really short meeting in April or something, could we, if we had to pass a resolution of some sort, could we potentially do
sure,
that?
That's been done before. It's been, emergency meetings have been done before, but geez, I don't even know if that would be necessary. Be under 10,000.
All right. Well, why don't you run with it? Let us know how it's shaking out and what actions we need to take. But it seems like something that's pretty doable. And it's a great opportunity for us, but also kind of in the broader spectrum of what Dane County's trying to do with organics collection and having an infrastructure in place. We can kind of do our part, and then I think the cool part of this is that whole water well that we got approved a couple of years ago. You know, our food waste, I think, would be essentially just being transported over there and then be turned into compost and then used for, you know, food, garden food that then is brought back to the farmer's market. So like, I think there's a nice circular story to it. And it's all within Fitchburg, so like, I think that's
awesome.
pretty cool story to tell about it.
Well,
Nice work.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this.
All I did was not push it off my plate onto somebody else I could get it done, right?
Hey, that counts, Chris, that counts.
I have two questions. Am I remembering that for a time we could drop off organics at the Fitchburg drop-off site? Was there ever a time we could do that?
I don't, not to my knowledge.
I feel like there was like one summer when they were piloting that.
There was a pilot curbside collection program,
Maybe that's what I remember.
but I'm not aware of any time when organics were allowed at the drop-off site.
Yeah, I think that takes another level of approval because of potential odors with that. So, you know, the pilot that we did before was, you know, it ran for a pretty good period of time in 2012. And originally it was, you know, going to the Columbia County, I had like a big rolling tumbler, but then, you know, there was too much contamination in it, so then it started to go up to Oshkosh, and like, well, what are we doing? You know, why are we sending our food waste up to Oshkosh? You know, like, it just wasn't making, you know, sense anymore, so we ended the pilot, and you know, but I think the lesson learned was like, we still have too much, you know, we have too many contaminants in our organics waste, essentially, was the issue. You know, and I think, you know, this program is different in the fact that, you know, it's a little bit more structured and there can be that immediate feedback because it is staffed by sustained day folks.
Well, and eventually Dr. Iden's
Yeah.
device, right? The other thing I was gonna ask about was, what do grocery stores typically do? Because they have an awful lot of organic food waste as well.
Well, when I worked at a grocery store, I was just going to the dumpster.
Just wondering if there was any opportunity to partner.
I think Dane County is looking at, you know, kind of some of those more macro food waste opportunities, whether it's with restaurants, large cafeterias, or grocery stores. I think that is part of the study, you know, that they're doing with their sustainability campus, and kind of, you know, so there's people working on that, like that component to it. You know, certainly if there's an opportunity to combine those efforts, you know, I think that's worth figuring out as we get into this pilot.
All right, anything else?
I don't have anything else.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
All right, moving on to item 5B, the 2025 waterway cleanup event planning.
Yeah.
So,
I really just want to nail down a date. I'd like to get April 26th nailed down. That would give me a little bit more time to advertise it as well, having it towards the end of April. And if everyone's okay with that, you know, I'd propose having the same location. So Chris, if you're available that date for Swan Creek, that'd be great.
I think I might shoot for April 19th because I'll probably be doing Crazy Legs.
April 19th?
Yeah.
That's the
April
day.
26th is Crazy Legs? Okay.
19th is the day before Easter.
Oh. Yeah. I'll think about that.
Okay. I guess if there's a different date, just let me know so I can be on the same page as far as advertising for that location.
Let me think about that and give you a final date, whether it's the 5th. You know, I guess it has to be the 5th or the 26th because we have our shredded electronics on the 12th.
Right.
And then the 19th is, you know, potentially the day before Easter. So I think that may potentially hurt our numbers.
I would agree. I mean,
I mean, all three of them have April 5th is too early, April 19th is the day before Easter, April 26th is Crazy Lake, so.
You can't plan in April.
Yeah.
No.
But Kim, would you be available on the 26th for, okay, for recording? Excellent. And
We'll do Dunn's Marsh again. So.
Okay, Dunn's Marsh. All right, I think you'll be with the Lions Club that had expressed interest.
Okay.
So I know you'll have some volunteers there.
Okay. Who's going to reach out to them? You are? Or?
Yeah, I'll work with them.
Okay.
And then I can do the Yarmouth Greenway. I think we can do that one.
Okay.
Again, so, well, all right, very good.
All right.
Set, all right.
All right. 5C, Spring E-Cycle Shredding Event coming up. So we set that in April, what was that date again?
12.
Okay.
Yep, so we'll be same vendors, so we'll have Pelletary doing the shredding, and we'll have Resource Solutions back for the electronics recycling. We're not changing anything with the routes or the flow through the Civic Campus. Seem to work pretty well, so we're not going to try to do anything different. Again, it's from 8 o'clock to 11.
I'll be there for it again.
Sorry?
I'll be coming again.
Excellent.
So we're going to reach out to the new alders, see if we can get them to help out.
Yeah, I'll send them an email.
Okay.
So we do have some volunteers. I know you said you would be available.
I'll be available.
I'll be there. We'll have a couple others.
We're going to be driving traffic.
I'll be there.
All
I
right.
think. Double checking. Yep.
Chris. All right.
Diane, I think she's going to be there too.
I believe Diane's mentioned she would be there as well.
Yes.
So I think we're good to go.
Okay, good.
Let's see, I really don't have any other updates. The materials, collection materials will be the same. They're still not able to take batteries at this event. Let's see, unfortunately, we will not have med drop at this event again, but it sounds like the Fitchburg Police Department will be participating in some way at the drug take-back event on April 26th. I have not heard about any specific times for that. But yeah, I guess if anyone does ask the question. And then, is there anything that we want to promote? You know, anything we want to kind of hand out to people while they're driving through, we could certainly do that.
Recycling your pizza boxes.
Yeah.
Might be a good one.
The big news, recycling news.
And most people know that they have a choice in terms of recycling bins. I mean, I never knew, I always got stuck with the one they had when we bought our house. I mean, I don't know if it'd be nice to have, you have a choice in recycling bins, you know, have the two there or something like that.
Yeah, maybe that'd be a good thing, just
Yeah,
some
it's fine.
general City of Fitchburg recycling information to pass out. I like that, yeah, I'll get some kind of condensed handouts on that as well. Okay, great.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, we'll send out just kind of a final commitment request on volunteering in the next couple weeks. Just make sure I think we find on people, let's make sure. We did pretty well in the fall with, 5 fewer people than we'd had the previous events.
Okay. All right, let's move on to agenda item 6, Bill, council update.
Whole bunch of things here, I'll just rattle through them. At some point in May, there will be a developer roundtable, so discussing real estate development within the city. The mayor and alders will be coming to each district this summer and having a listening session, so be on the lookout for that.
Okay.
My predecessor, Alder Gerhardt, has been selected as one of the 40 under 40.
Nice.
So. McGaw Park will be getting 4 additional pickleball courts. Not enough budget to do the lighting there. So the footings will be installed, but no actual lighting yet. At some point in the future that will come. Public Works Department is outfitting 3 new plow trucks. Parks Department is getting 2 new pickup trucks. One of them is going to be an F-150 Lightning and the other one is an F-350 diesel, because that one has to be heavier duty for some plowing. I'll ask at some point, you know, is there a source of biodiesel we could use for at least some of this non-electric vehicles? Dark sky ordinance passed. Single family and 2-family homes are exempt. McGaw Forest Management Plan passed. So if you go out to McGaw Park, a large chunk of that is, you know, very densely populated with undesirable stuff that's going to be converted to like an oak savanna. So like 90% of the growth is going to be removed and replaced with prairie grass. And then remaining large desirable trees will stay. The Yarmouth Greenway stream restoration resolution passed. The library has a mini food pantry up and running on the 1st floor near vending. Greenway Cross and Coho intersection in the North Fish Hatchery Road area has a temporary traffic circle for the next 6 months. There has been a lot of people running stop signs and you know, near misses and.
Where's it at?
Greenway Cross, which is just south of the Beltline, runs east-west, and then Coho runs north-south.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, kids walking to school and cars not really caring that there's kids walking around in it. You know. So we'll see how that goes. Public reception for the fire department chief candidates happened 4 days ago. So if you were at Lacey Road Fire Station, you saw the 3 finalists, and the PFC I think is meeting maybe a week from now, 2 weeks from now, to make the final decision on that. Sustainability plan will be discussed at tomorrow's council meeting and brought to a vote at the April 8th council meeting. March 25th council meeting is canceled due to lack of quorum. Absentee ballots will hit the mail starting tomorrow. In-person absentee voting is from March 18th to 28th. The city now has 5 additional bicycle-friendly businesses. There was a water main break under Fish Hatchery Road near where 9 Springs Creek crosses, so that's got to be replaced. And the final item on my list, there is the possibility that Madison Metro Route E will be extended. So right now it terminates at McKee Road and Maple Grove Road. It may come along McKee East to Fitchburg Road and head south, and then the roundabout at Nesbitt would be where it terminates, which is just you know, in the same neighborhood as new high density development that's going to go in. That's the end of it for me.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 7, staff and commissioner updates. Go ahead, Ben, solid waste.
So we took the Holiday Light Strings Resource Solutions at the end of January, collected 716 pounds of holiday lights. Very close to collecting, the Lions Club, I should say, is getting very near their 1,000-pound goal. So we'll let you all know when that goal has been reached. Then we've also began compiling some data for our recycling activities, annual report that will be due in April. For stormwater, we had some rain garden coaching sessions a couple weekends ago. That was cool. Got to meet with some residents, talk a little bit about how to install a rain garden. There was the Yahara Pride Farms Annual Watershed Conference. So I just wanted to mention this. When the city of Fitchburg makes those payments to Yahara Winds to help us meet our phosphorus reduction requirements, a lot of that money goes to farmers with Yahara Pride Farms to put in, vegetated buffers or do different kind of no-till cropping. So it was very interesting. Got a lot of farmers doing, a lot of very beneficial things in the watershed, trying to reduce phosphorus and TSS going into the waterways. Got a groundwater level monitoring plan for the Goose Lake area. So in April here, I'm going to be looking to install some monitoring wells, weather station out there. So this kind of ties into the Fitchburg Road flooding project. Trying to get a better understanding of groundwater out there. Got the MS4 report, which we talked about. Still some ongoing discussions regarding the proposed sod farm pond, or it was a proposed regional retention pond up by McCoy Road. Whether or not that's going to be constructed, still unknown at this point. Got drafts of the South Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Plan and Greenfield Neighborhood Plans. I'll have to check with our planning department to see when they were thinking to bring those to RCC to get input. So right now they're kind of just in a draft stage. We've been working with planning staff and their consultant on the contents of the plan. Continuing to update stormwater asset attributes in GIS, trying to get a better handle on that. And then this week we will have some controlled burns taking place at a few different stormwater facilities. So all the Terravessa, all those terrace rain gardens will be burned. We'll also have Uptown South, which is adjacent to Sayin Road, will be burned. The Addison infiltration basin, that's at the intersection of Lacey and Sayin, will be burned, and then also Oak Meadow at the intersection of Lacey and Fish Hatchery will be burned this week, as weather allows.
Hey Ben, have you heard anything from Todd yet, USGS, regarding the presentation?
Oh yeah, let me reach out to him and see if we can do that.
I he's there.
Yeah, he's still there.
He's still there. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll also, I'd like to find out what's going to be the impact to their budget, because they do cost sharing. So it's one thing we should find out from them too for next year. They still plan to do that, or they still have their budget.
Yeah, so there actually was kind of a change already where they're still able to contribute financially, but they're not able to, we're not able to get the same deal on the sampling costs as we were previously, or the lab analysis costs. So it did get slightly more expensive, but it wasn't, there was still sufficient budget to cover it, but hopefully there won't be continued changes as you said. And,
I'm glad he's still there.
So. Yeah.
All right, Phil, sustainability, we've heard a lot already about today.
Yeah, there's just a little bit more with updates. So I attended in the past month or so, Renew Wisconsin held their 2025 Renewable Energy Summit in Buenos Aires. Just got some good networking and new ideas there. Went to a sustainability breakfast forum that Sustain Dane hosted on alternate transportation in Dane County. Got some notes to process from that for follow-up. Still working on both the Green Tier Legacy Community Report for 2024 and Fitchburg's Energy Benchmarking and Renewable Energy Analysis for 2024. The GTLC report is due March 31st, so that'll be done by the end of this month. And then I'll be able to share that at the May meeting, which actually I guess I won't be here for, but I can at least make sure that I've got it available for you to...
Be the primer on it.
Yeah. And then the energy report, I'll get
renewable numbers from the utilities sometime in June. So hopefully by the June meeting, I'll at least have the basic structure of that report together, even if the numbers are need to be tweaked a bit before the end of the year. In a couple weeks, I will also be heading to Dubuque for the annual Growing Sustainable Communities Conference that they host. It's primarily a regional sustainability conference. A few folks from outside Dane County show up as well. But this Sustainable Leaders Collaborative that we've been doing with Dane County for a few years now, kind of networking, resource sharing with our monthly calls and other activities, partnering on grants and whatnot. Four of us, myself, my kind of peers from Sun Prairie and Middleton, as well as Kathy Kuntz with Dane County, we're going to be presenting on that collaborative as one of the sessions there. We just kind of take it for granted that we have this concentrated network of communities interested in sustainability that also have hired staffers to pursue those goals. When we talk to people outside of Dane County, we find a lot of surprise at the level of engagement we have with neighboring communities, and we hear again and again, wow, I wish we talked with our neighbors like that. So we thought it was worth doing a little presentation and kind of talking with others about how they can kickstart that as well. So that'll be April 1 and 2 is that conference.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, then somebody needs to vote early.
I will plan on it. Good thing they do the early voting right here at my place of work.
No excuse.
That's right.
All right, thanks, Ben and Phil. All right, so item D, the activities being conducted or monitored by commissioners. Before I turn over to Cam, I think everyone knows that Diane's no longer going to be, her term expires in April. And so I just like, to acknowledge and all the hard work that she gave to RCC over the years. I have no idea when she first started, but I know she's.
We'll figure it out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. When you meet, have her at the bar and meet with her.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't mind having, organize an event.
Yeah,
at some
maybe
point.
do something like that.
It probably won't be on an RCC night, but maybe we'll find another time where we can make it happen. Worked with her for a long time, and some of the details that she unearthed and came up with over the years were just remarkable.
Yeah.
Her memory too.
Her memory was good. I mean, we're really going to miss her institutional knowledge within Fitchburg.
We hope that we've all remembered what she's handed off from that institutional knowledge over the years. I know she shared a lot with us, but how much did we absorb? We're about to find out.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Very thorough, and it seems like no matter how big the agenda package, she read the whole thing
into
the detail.
That's probably her background with being an accountant, pretty detailed.
Yeah, very detail oriented. But I think and really didn't have the background in this, but just had a passion for it, and really just brought so many great ideas, and generally was always trying to get us to do the right thing as a community. Think about it from the environmental perspective, but also with her accounting background, bringing in the economics piece to it, and how sustainability can really be a triple bottom line win for our community. And so definitely going to miss working with her. I've worked with her on this for 16, 17 years now.
Yeah.
So.
But she'll be around.
She'll be around, and if we get really off track, I'm sure we'll hear about it.
We have to speed dial her during a meeting, ask her some history.
So thank you, Diane, if you watch the video.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Diane. All right, go ahead, Kim.
Well, I just wanted to share with everyone in my other life, my full-time job, I work for Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, and we're a statewide membership association, and we represent all 72 county conservationists across the state of Wisconsin and land and water departments and supervisors. And so we have an annual conference every year, and that was last week in Green Bay. And I'm a part of a plastic recycling committee that sprung out of the Great Lakes Committee that we have as one of our committees. And so our committee had gotten together and said, you know, we really should present at our conference because a lot of the people we're working with in our committee are doing a lot of great work around the state in terms of trying to reduce plastic use. So we also at the conference give out items every year, and the last couple of years I said no plastic, no throwaway stuff. It has to be sustainable, usable. That was something our committee was very committed on. And so these were the bags that we handed out, but the best part is we put some Diane, if you're watching, I will get you a bag. But the plastic, you know, facts on them. And so then we also had a display board. I called Ben, asked if we could borrow the display board that we use for our BYOB events. And so we did a big display board, and then we, Mary Jo, who's the county conservationist up in Ashland County, and I put together a bunch of sustainable swaps that we use at home and had that at the display table, and then we raffled off some free items for people to try as a way to do it. But for the presentation, just really briefly, we kind of talked about all the different groups that are involved in this committee and what they're doing. But Greg Colhurst, who is the county con in Door County, has been doing well sampling as part of his job, you know, for PFAS and other things. And the amount of microplastics that came back from the well sampling was really unbelievable. So it was pretty eye-opening. We really kind of talked about, you know, the impact of the microplastics and everything. So it was a great opportunity for us to do some education with our own people. And some of the feedback we heard after the presentation is one of the supervisors walked in and he said, I walked in a non-believer and I walked out and my head was spinning just with, you know, all of the information and facts that came out. So a lot of people came up to me afterwards and started, you know, talking to me about ideas and stuff. So it was good. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, that's great, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
So how many bags did you get?
Well, we handed out about 400, 500, but I might be able to, you know, find a few for my friends.
I have a couple quick things. So the Madison School District, you might have saw that they hired a sustainability person. So this was one of our goals from when we started the carton recycling at Leopold way back when. So they've added that sustainability person, which is a big step in kind of getting the right policy in place. We had a good discussion with an or a former MMSD board member and suggested going off of an existing policy to update to try to help out with the waste reduction and recycling in the cafeterias. And so that seems like our path to get the policy in place. So the goal is ultimately to get the policy in place sometime this semester. We have a grant from the Carton Council to do it. So that's what I'm working on with Sustained Aim for the next 3 months essentially, is getting that policy in place, and then hopefully we're helping with implementation when we get to next fall, like of this happening in every elementary school, which has been the goal for a while, but wasn't going to happen without a policy in place just because of so many staff changes we've realized. And then another thing was, John Welsh from the Dane County Department of Waste and Renewals and myself and Vic Velacrez from Mundo Esperanza got a surprise call a couple weeks ago to present at the State Solid Waste Conference on solid waste in our sister city of Cusco, Peru. And so had a day to prepare the presentation and then gave it the next day as a fill-in at the conference. So we gave that presentation. Happy to send that out to everybody if they'd like to see what's going on. So I'll share a PDF out with the RCC on what we talked about.
Great, thank you.
Lots of photos. Dr. Tinjum has been down to the same landfill and seen it himself, and so he knows all about it.
Down to, we're like up to.
Yeah. Down south, but up to 13,000 feet, so their landfill's at 13,000 feet in elevation. So we went and visited what their situation was. So we think it's probably one of the highest landfills in the world for serving a major municipal area like Cusco.
I've heard of a landslide, but what about a landfill slide?
That's a possibility. That's a possibility. They are doing a good job of covering it up, but like I still think, I think
Quito is up there also.
yeah, I think that's a possibility. Oh, Quito's up there. Okay.
All right.
So that's all I got.
Okay, well, thanks. Anybody else have anything? Andy? You see you up there?
I just have a question for Kim. You weren't at the last meeting, but we sort of volunteered you to write an article for June. Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
that was my plan.
Sort of volunteered.
I saw that in the notes, so thank you.
Okay, good. Otherwise, I'm really busy with prescribed burning and spring activities, so I might be able to help on some of these events, but I really won't know until the last minute.
Sure.
Okay.
At some point, you should do an article on prescribed burns. Like, I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You just got voluntold.
I'll do it.
All right.
All right. Anything else? If not, we can go ahead and adjourn the RCC meeting. Exactly at 9 o'clock.
8:59.
8:59.
Oh, 9 o'clock now.
9 o'clock.
Boom.
Thank you.